Perek Elu Treifus concluded with the sugyas related to fish. I think it's kedai to end with one last raid bite. Again, no one says we're not going to come back to this raid in the next parak or two, but at least to end and make a hadron on Perek Elu Treifus with a topic related to fish. Is it kosher or is it non-kosher? That many, many years ago took the world by storm. In fact, the Rosh HaMedabrim in this whole noisei was none other than the great Noda B'Yehuda, Rabbi Cheskel Landau, the Bezin of Prague. In fact, the tshuva that the Noda B'Yehuda wrote about this particular fish goes down as arguably the most famous tshuva in Tshuva's Noda B'Yehuda. So imagine that, because there are a few pretty famous ones. But this is definitely in the conversation. It's on the Mount Rushmore of Tshuva's Noda B'Yehuda in terms of the impact that it made b'shaitai and the legacy that this tshuva holds. So the tshuva, which is printed, ironically, in Madura Tinyana, this is not a Madura Kama, but this is a Madura Tinyana, it's in Yeridea Simin Chav Ches. The background is that there was a kehila in Romania/Hungary that was called Temeshvar. The kehila of Temeshvar had formerly been a kehila of Ashkenazi Jews, but over the last few decades, prior to when the Noda B'Yehuda sat down and wrote this tshuva, a lot of Sfardim had come from different countries and they had settled it to the point that the kehila of Temeshvar was almost 50% Ashkenazi and 50% Sephardi. Now there was a certain fish that was native to that area. The fish in the tshuva from the Noda B'Yehuda is called the stirl, or the shtirl. Today it's known as the sterlet, which is a member of the sturgeon species of fish. More about that later. And this fish, the Ashkenazi Jews in Temeshvar had not eaten, as long as anybody can remember. But now you have all these Sephardi Jews that are coming, and they say that in Morocco and Tunisia, these different places that we lived in, we used to also have access to this stirl, and we used to eat it. And as a result, they're arguing that this fish is really kosher. Now, what happened was these two minhagim emerged. There were the Jews that ate it, there were Jews that didn't eat it. In the year 1781, Temeshvar hired a new Rav. And the Rav's name was Reb Tzvi Hersh Segal. He was a Talmud Muvik of the Noda B'Yehuda. He was, in the words of Reb Shmuel Landau, Mei Oichlei Shulchana. He was very, very close to the Noda B'Yehuda. And he comes into the city, and he sees there's this big tumult. You do eat the fish, you don't eat the fish. And he says, you know what, I have access to Rabban Shel Kol Bnei Agoyla, my great Rebbe. And he sends a letter to his Rebbe, and he asks his Rebbe, this fish, is it kosher or is it not kosher? And included in the package that he sent him, as this must have gone certified mail or FedEx, he sends him an actual fish. And he tells you that this is the fish that everybody's talking about, everybody's tumbling about, and I need to be machriya this, because that makes sense. Some say it's kosher, the others say this is mamish not kosher. Is it okay or is it not okay? So Noda B'Yehuda sits down and he writes a tshuva. He says, Doime doidi litzvi ula oifer, hanoisin imrei shefer, eshkol ha-koifer, harehu, kvoid ahuvi yedidi v'chavivi, harav ha-gadol, ma'oiz u'migdol, ha-chochem ha-sholem, oitzer bolem, Reb Tzvi Hersh Segal of Bezin the Kehila Kedosha Temeshvar. Michtavi higiyani mi machras yom ha-kippurim im hadag. You don't see this every day. Right? Every tshuva starts Michtavi higiyani, but doesn't usually come with a bottle of wine, right? Doesn't usually come with a fish. Right? Sounds nice. But Michtavi higiyani mi machras yom ha-kippurim. I got this the day after Yom Kippur im hadag, together with the fish. And you asked me to try to figure out what's going on over here. Now, it seems that one of the questions Reb Tzvi Segal had asked the Noda B'Yehuda was, these Sephardic Jews that are coming from faraway lands, do they have an emunus to say that where we were, people used to eat it? Like, they even believe? And that's really what the first paragraph of the tshuva is about. He says, do you want to know if they're believed? He says, number one, this is Eidecha Nemam B'Isurim. They would be believed. But besides, it's not an Eidech. You tell me a whole Kehila, people are coming and telling you. So in terms of believing their Messiah that they have, that they used to eat this fish, there's no question in the world that this is something that's going to be okay. V'omnam, he says, I took the fish and I looked at it and I experimented on it and I tried figuring out whether this is okay or not. And I'm going to tell you what my findings were. But in order to appreciate the finding of the Noda Yehuda, we need to learn one Ramban ala Torah. This Ramban is in Parshas Shmini, and it's on the pasuk of Ezet Toichel Mikol Asher B'Amoyim Kol Asher Lo Yisnaper V'Kaskeses, which was the topic of the last two daf in the Perek Elu Treifes. Zok the Ramban. This is such a critical Ramban. Snapirim. What are fins? Elu Ashat Bahen. Right? These are what the animal swims with. Kaskasim. What are scales? Elu Akfuim Bay. These are what is part and parcel of the actual fish. It's Lashon Rashi, and it comes from the Gemara Masechtas Chulin, the Mishnah Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph. Says the Ramban, Avaloi Tovim U'Lashayim. Even though Chazal said that the kaskasim akfuim to the fish, do not mistakenly understand the words of the sages to mean shein kfuim begufam mamish, that they're literally attached to the body of the fish, udvukim ba'iradag, and they're literally one with the skin of the fish. They're not. Avokarim kfuim, the only reason they're referred to as kfuim is she'enam noda mimenu. It's because they don't move. They don't flap the same way the fins do. But really, they could be removed. In other words, they don't move when they're attached, but they could be removed. In fact, these are the round scales, whose surface is the same as a fingernail, which can be peeled off the skin of the fish by hand, or with a knife. But says the Ramban, anytime you have these scales that are literally kavua v'davuk ba'iradag, and they're attached to the skin of the fish, and they cannot be removed. You can't detach them from the oir of the dag. It's not scales. Ubalav asaru, and the owner of this fish would not be allowed to eat it. For the Kach Amr B'Gemara, says the Ramban, he goes to work over here. That's why the Gemara said, we learned the Gemara yesterday's daf. On daf Samich Vav Amud Beis, the kaskeses levushahu. The lashon of Chazal was that it's a levush. What does it mean it's a levush? Because a garment, a beged you could take on, you could put back off. Uloshen atoysefta eloena kaskasim shemelubish bahem. Usnapirim sheshot. What does it mean melubish bahem? Because a beged is something that you could take on, you could put. Says Ramban, take a look at the Targum Unkelis. You know Unkelis Taichis Kaskasin? Unkelis says Vikalfin. What does kalfin mean? It means to peel. They're peels. Shein klipin shalor. Nifshatim in a klofim mimenu kikilfei ha'ilanois v'haperos. You can peel them the same way you can peel the bark of a tree, or you can peel a fruit. V'chein inyan hakasav sha'amar v'siryon kaskasim hu lavash. There's a pasuk in Shmuel that talks about the armor that Goliath was wearing, and it describes it as Siryon Kaskasin. Says Ramban, if you ever saw the armor that these tough guys used to wear, so they were all made of these metal rings. So they were covered with metal, right? And sometimes there were little gaps in the metal. So what they would do is they would take these kaskasin, and they would go and they would plug those little holes. But those were things that you can plug, and if you wanted to remove, you can remove it. And that's why armor is referred to as kaskasim, because of the nature that this is something that that can come on and something that can come off. Bottom line, said the Ramban, that you want to know what kaskasim are. Kaskasim are scales. And even though the Mishnah says they're elu akfuim by, it's so misleading, Dr. Ramban, because really it's almost the opposite. Kfuim sounds like you can't move it. Punkt fakir. You have to be able to move it. And if you can't move it, it's not scales. It's by definition something you can move. And now I know that because Chazal referred to it as a levush, and if look at Targum Uklas, Targum refers to it as kalfin, and it's poshet. That's the mashal of Assyria and kaskasim who love it, referring to Goliath. The bottom line is the Ramban went ahead and Ramban said an unbelievable chiddush lalacha. He said that the only time scales are scales is if they could be removed. If they can't be removed now. Why is this a chiddush lalacha? Right, we got to absorb this because this is where the whole Sturgeon controversy. You know, it's Ramban, you know nothing about Sturgeon. This is where it starts. It starts because the Ramban is saying that the kaskasim have to be removable. A chiddush, because the Gemara doesn't say it. It's not a Talmud Bavli, it's not a Talmud Yerushalmi, it's not anywhere in Chazan Teres Kohen. It's nowhere in Chazal. In fact, the Mishnah is mashma fakert, because the Mishnah says that kfuim, and kfuim sounds like they can't be moved. But comes again the Ramban, and the Ramban said just the opposite. Scales need to be removable, and if they're not adjustable and they're not removable and if they're stuck, you can't take it off biyadei besakin. In that instance, this is not going to be considered a scale. How do I know that? I'm learning a diuk in the lashon hapasik and in unkelis, because we refer to it as this levush. Chazal mentioned that in a few different places, and unkelis says kalfin. What does kalfin mean? It means peels, and based on that, if you cannot peel it, it's not going to be kosher. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Pei Gimel, Dinei Dagim, first halacha. Simonei Dagim mefurashim b'Torah. Kol sheyesh lo snapper v'kaskeses tahar. V'snapper hu sheshot boi v'kaskeses ein aklipas akvuis boi. It's literally a Mishnah in Elu Treifus. Chulin und Tesam Alf. Says the Ramah, v'dafka shein neklofim b'yad. The only time somebody's called kaskasin is if you can remove it b'yad or b'kli. But if you can't peel it, it's not called kaskeses. What's the Makar? Says the Ramah, it's the Magen Mishnah, Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph of Hilchas Machalas Asuras. If you look at the Magen Mishnah, what's the Makar to the Magen Mishnah? It's the Ramban ala Torah. So the Ramah in the first Halachim Dinei Dagim brings this Ramban, and that is the only time a fish is considered a kosher fish is in the event that it has scales that can be removed. But to the extent that these scales cannot be removed, in that instance it's not going to be considered a kosher fish. So says the Noda B'Yehuda. Nachzir le'inyoneinu. V'amnon, anino sisi dagzeh. The L'shoinei Azov of Noda B'Yehuda in these next two paragraphs are epic. He said, I experimented with this fish. V'yesh lo shtei shuras kaskas, and they have two rows of scales. Shura achas b'tzad yamin, v'shura achas b'tzad smol. You know, I tried peeling them off with my hand, I couldn't. They can be removed with a keli, and as long as they can be removed with a keli, that's the criteria that you need. That satisfies Ramban said. That's enough to say it's considered peel. He said, I put it in water, and I left it there, and I added loig, I added some chemical inside of it, and after that, niklafu biyad, I was even able to peel it with my own hand. Uledaiti, says the Noda B'Yehuda, even had I not been able to peel it before I soaked it in this chemical-laden mashka, I would have thought that's okay. Don't suggest you're going to say maybe, what do you mean, if you add chemicals and now all of a sudden you're able to peel it, that's a sign it's mutter. The chemicals removed it. The mayim azim is what moved it. I didn't do it biyad, I didn't do it bekeli, it was the mayim that did it. The mabekach, who cares? Soif, Sturgeon, kaskasim ulovush. I read the Ramban. The Ramban said that it has to be a lavush. A lavush means it can come off. What's the difference? How you remove it? If you remove it biyada b'sakin, the Rabban said, or you did it with some chemical. If I can remove it, I can remove it. So to me, maybe this says I was able to get it off a kli. But the minute I soaked it, boom, it came off in a second. 3 hours, you'll see it's going to peel right off. Add a little chemicals, who cares? At the end of the day, this was something I was very easily able to remove. Says the review then, therefore, as far as I'm concerned, this fish sounds kosher. And then the Ramban says, the Noda B'Yehuda says, the Ikka Chumra, that the Ramban laid out in Parsha Shmini, that in the event that you can't peel it, it's not considered kosher. If there was anyone else in the world that would have said this Chiddush, I would have gone up against him. Because who cares that you can't peel it? Whoever said a word about kiluf, adarabba, b'mishnah chulin daf nun tes number aleph amru kaskasim akfuim boy. V'Ramban sham b'pirusha nitchak b'zeh. He tried being doichig what that means. V'kosavim ein neklofim loy nikr levush shareim dvukim ba'or. V'ani oimer, the Ramban says, you're worried about the diak levush? Can you explain to me how you're going to read this pasuk? Oiru basar tal bisheni. You've said this in Perek Yud. So the oir is also a levush. The bas is also a levush. What, can you peel off the skin of an animal, of a person? Could you remove his basar? No. If yesh litchos ksas, he says, okay, maybe it's not the biggest raya in the world, but the bottom line is, it doesn't say it anywhere. The Mishnah is mashma fakir. And what about oiru basar tal bisheni? V'amna. Midivi Rabbi Seinu balei talmud hoyli lahavi stira. In fact, Rabbi Yehuda said, if you ask me, I think I have a raya not like the Ramban, because if you take a look at the Gemara, so the Gemara says somebody brought Rav Ashi a certain fish. And he asked Rav Ashi, is this a kosher fish or is this not a kosher fish? So the Gemara says Rav Ashi went lahadiya and went to the sun. He saw it had scales. And he said it was mutter. Says the Noda Behuda, Ula divrei Ramban, Ma bekach de chazi la'ein Hashem b'shoyu b'tzimchi. Who cares that he looked in the sun and he saw that it had scales? Akati man yemach and a klofim imenu. How did he know that you were able to peel it? He should have tried. Elavadai. This is a raya not like the Ramban. The cholhecha the emesayu kaskasin lo'ichpas lanim neklafim. So he says, you're asking me, I learned this Ramban, I'll tell you. I know this Ramban. And if it wasn't the Ramban, hoyisi don kenegdai. You know why? 4 reasons. 4 reasons. No, it doesn't say a word about kiluf anywhere in Chazal. It's not in Bab's Nine Yerushalmi, and it's not in Teres Kainim. Number 2, the Mishnah is mashma fakert. The Mishnah says kfuim bay. Kfuim bay means kfuim bay. The Ramban saying a shtickle Torah to be madchik. What kfuim bay really means? Oh, it's not. It means it doesn't flap. But no, kfuim sounds like it's part and parcel. The diak of lavush. What about oiru basar tal bisheni? And I have a right for the Gemara, but it's not that way, because the Gemara brings a whole story about Rav Ashi wanted to see if an animal. He saw it had scales. He knew it was good to go. What do you mean? Just because it has scales? Yeah, it means it has fins also. We understand that. But how do you know you can peel it? Why didn't he check? He assumed it could chasser from the Gemara, like the Noda Behuda. It was all about, it scales mean nothing if you can't peel it. So the Gemara should have bavarned it. The Gemara should have said he saw that it had scales and he peeled it. So he says, if you're asking me, this whole Ramban is a milsida to me. Avo ma esa. V'Rabbeinu agadol Ramban omra. V'Rabba Magid beperek aleph macholos asurei seviyoi. V'Rabbi Yois Reish Simin Pei Gimel Eviyoi. V'Ramah Kavai B'Ramah. It's tzrichim anu lokuf as neinu v'lishmaya devreim be'ema. We have no choice. Because if everybody brings it, who am I to be chaylik? I have no choice. And we have to be makabel it be'ema. But Zokta Noda Behuda, I'm being makabel this Ramah, even though I don't understand it. Aval al koponim, kosh and a klofim. As long as you can peel it. I don't care how you got it off. So he writes to his Talmud Reb Tzvi Hersh Segal, the Rav of Temeshvar, Hungary. You should know, this fish that you sent me, Toharu, without any question in the world. There was another fish, which is a whole other discussion that was mentioned, that's called the tick. It seems to also come from the species of sturgeon, so that he didn't send them the actual fish. But the other one that you mentioned, assuming if it meets this criteria, and he says that's what it sounds like from YouTube, but I don't know, I didn't see it. Without any doubt in the world, it's going to be okay. So Rav Tzvi Hersh Segal receives this letter from his Rebbe, from the Gadol Adar, and he immediately goes and he tells his Kehillah, Chevra, this is mutter, this is okay, you're allowed to eat it, everything is fine. And word slowly starts to spread, within Hungary, Romania, that part of Europe, and the word gets out that the Noda Behuda was mata the fish, this sterlet fish, the stittle, and people went and people started eating it. Now, just to appreciate for a second the chiddush of the Noda Behuda, there are really 2 chiddushim, right? Number 1, he's saying that when the Ramban said that you have to be able to remove it, I don't care how you're able to remove it. As long as he can remove it, that's going to be okay. Even if it takes 3 hours of water, and even if you have to add some chemical into it, I don't care, right? His lashon is al koponim kol sheneklofim al yidei eze peula sheyiyah. Right? It doesn't matter how. As long as you can remove it, that it means it's a lavush, and that in of itself is going to be okay. And it's coming a little bit from a place that this whole Ramban's a chiddush. So to me, tafastem or tafasta, tafastem rubaloi tafasta. But the bottom line is, that's the first chiddush of the Noda B'Yehuda. Right? No one said it before the Noda B'Yehuda. The Ramban Sloshin is B'Yadai B'Sakin. I don't know, if I go ahead and I add some chemicals to it, Mechatesa, that's going to be okay. But that's the first Chiddush Noda B'Yehuda. Second Chiddush Noda B'Yehuda, and this is a very big Chiddush, is that the Minig Yisrael in Temeshvar, and it sounds like in Hungary, B'chlal, was to be machmer. People did not eat this fish. So to go ahead now and say that something that Yidden were noyeg l'chumra all of a sudden is mutter is not so pasha. One of the mekayres to it being not so pasha is one line in a Rash Bechul and Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis. The Rashba's lashon is ulefichach nirali shekol ma shenagu be'isser ve'ein adam yodea ikroi shel isser. Machmas toise, machmas chomer, nishol ve'ematirulai. If someone wants to get out of it, you can't be materet. The dilma mishum chumra. Va'ad shenoida she'ikre machmas toise hoya ein matirulai. If we know that Yidden were noyeg a chumra, and we don't know why they were noyeg the chumra, you can give me reasons why you think it should be mutter, but unless you know the reason that they were noyeg the chumra, and you know how to undermine that reason, the halacha is it has to remain chomer. And it's not poshit to go ahead and say that a davar shenagu by l'chumra is suddenly going to be mutter. And the Rebbe Yehuda, again, with his big places, said, to me this doesn't even fall into that sugya. It's mutter. It has kaskasim and snap. I don't go off for my life. It's a kosher fish. This is what he sends back. Everything is going to be okay. Fast forward about 15 or so years later. There was a Talmud of the Noda B'Yehuda, who at the time was a Rav of a very chashuva kihila in Hungary, the town of Arad, by the way, not to be confused with Arad in Eretz Yisrael, but in the town of Arad. But this was a man who years later would go down in infamy. His name was Aaron Chorin. Aaron Chorin is today considered one of the proto-reformers. Ad Kidei Kach, the Chassam Sofer in a Tshuva, and this is in Chelik Vav, said about Aaron Chorin. So he describes him as Aaron Chorin Rabbiner. He says, Hamechuna Befi Acher. Just like Acher was Yotzel Atar B'Sra, he was Yotzel Atar B'Sra. He was the one that fought very hard for the organ, the Hamburg Temple in 1819, and he got involved in a lot of controversies, and he was on the wrong side of everything during the latter part of his life. And again, the Chassam Sofer called him Acher. But at the time, he's a Talmud of the Noda B'Yehuda. He comes across as being very sincere and very earnest, and he decides that it's a chutzpah, that there are people in Hungary that are still being machmer and not eating this sterlet fish, despite the fact that Rabban Shel Kol Bnei Hagoyla, the Noda B'Yehuda, went, and the B'Yehuda said that it was mutter. And one day he goes and he, in a very public way, he goes to the shuk, it's on an Erev Shabbos, and he says, I'd like to buy 100 pounds of sterlet, and even that other fish, that tick that the Noda B'Yehuda mentioned that he never saw, but if it mirrors this fish, it's going to be okay. It makes a big public spiel out of it. Word got around, and I don't know why the gap of time, but several years later, another Hungarian Rav, someone by the name of Rabbi Yitzchak Grieshaber, he was the Paksh Ruv. He was the Ruv, again, a Hungarian city of Paksh. He came and he got very disappointed, very upset at the fact that Aaron Chorin was making such a big deal about this. And even though he's a Talmud of Yehuda, and the Yehuda was Mekel, but he felt that this was something that was very, very wrong. And he got into it with Aaron Chorin. And they started having an old school intellectual debate. So, if you're familiar with polemics from back in the day, so sometimes they would just duke it out in a couple of chuvas, and sometimes they double down. They start writing kuntruses and megillas, and it gets very, very intense. And in the year 1798, this is 17 years after the Noda B'Yehuda had written his tshuva. It's 5 years after the Noda B'Yehuda already passed away. He sits down and he writes a kuntras. He calls it Imrei Noyam. This is Aaron Chorin, and he's making the argument for why it is that this fish is mutter, and a chutzpah that this yid, the Pak Sheruv, is coming out against me. Adarabba, Moran Shel Kol Yisrael held its mutter. How's it possible that a Hungarian rabbi with a small kehillah can go ahead and paskin kineged Noda B'Yehuda and even have a certain kanos against people that are mekel? It's a chutzpah noira, and he was so upset, and he goes in and he writes this Sefer Imrei Noyam, where he talks all about everything, and he comes out very, very strong. Now, Aaron Chorin was a very clever man till the end of his life. He was very, very smart, and Aaron Chorin did his work. before he went ahead and he published the Imrei Noyam, he verified that the tshuva from the Noda B'Yehuda was authentic. Now, let's appreciate something. We live in a world right now where we have tshuvas Noda B'Yehuda on demand, right? So we have Madura Kama, we have Madura Tinyana. If you know the history, Sha'al's tshuvas Noda B'Yehuda Madura Kama was printed in what year? Drum roll, 1776. That's when the first edition of Tshuvas Noda B'Yehuda, I don't know if it was July 4th, but 1776 is when the first Maduras, you want to know what the Yidden were doing in 1776. There's an answer. But our founding fathers. But 1776, that's the year that the first Madura of Tshuvas Noda B'Yehuda was printed. The second Madura was printed in 1811, many years after, almost 20 years after Noda B'Yehuda was nifter, by his son Rav Shmuel Landau. These Tshuvas, all of this excitement took place between the printing of Madura Kama and Madura Tinyana, which means this tshuva is obviously not a Madura Kama. We said it's in Madura Tinyana. It was put there by Reb Shmuel Landau. But at the time, this is not like a tshuva that you can find, in a sefer, because it hadn't been published yet. So who has the tshuva? Reb Tzvi Segel has the tshuva. Now, Aaron Chorin, who had reached out to Tzvi Segel, and he asked him if he could send him the real tshuva. He sent it to him. But he was even smarter than that. He took the tshuva and he sent it to Prague. And he said, Yilamdenu Rabbeinu, is this authentic? He did Kiyum Shtaris, right? What's Kiyum Shtaris? Getting Dav Beis, B'fanei Nechtav, B'fanei Nechtav. He literally did a Kiyum Shtaris. And he asked him. And he gets back a letter that's signed by Reb Shmuel Landau, who's now the Rav of Prague, the son, Rabbi Yisrael Landau, who's another one to be the son, and Rabbi Elazar Flecklist about Tshuva Me'ahava. And they all say, B'fanenu nechtav, B'fanenu nechtav. This is 100% legit. This is a real Tshuva. So when he comes out now and he's going to write the Imrei Noyam, there's not going to be no Bubba Mises over here. I know this is a real Tshuva. And he goes out, he puts it out, and he comes out guns blazing. But Rabbi Yitzchak Grieshaber, he went and he wrote a response. His response was called Makel Noyam, right? So Imrei Noyam, Makel Noyam. You know what a Makel is? A Stecken Belaz. So he comes out with a Makel Noyam and he says, Aziz Stecken, Ayen Aziz Stecken. And he comes out with a Makel Noyam and he writes this rebuttal and he comes after Aaron Chorin. Now, there was a little bit of history between Rabbi Yitzchak Grieshaber and the Chorin. Chorin is again, at that time, he wasn't Yotzel L'Tar B'Sra, but he's a left-leaning type of rabbi, a little too liberal for sure for the Hungarian Rabbanim. And Rabbi Yitzchak Grieshaber, he's a frimmer, an ehrlicher. He's not budging one iota from the Messiah, right? Hamevin Yovin. That's the world that he comes from. And the bottom line is, they go at it a little bit, and he comes and he writes his Makel Noyam. And in the Makel Noyam, he said something shocking. In the Makel Noyam, he said that I want you to know. I also heard about this letter that was written by the Noda B'Yehuda to Reb Tzvi Segel. And I went to Prague, and I reached out to the Noda B'Yehuda. And I got gefragt, is it really true? And I told him all the reasons that I don't think this makes any sense. I was very disturbed by this psak. And I said, to me, this doesn't make any sense. And he said, the Noda B'Yehuda gave me a letter. And in the letter he said, I'm chayzer from my psak. I backed down. I retract my psak. And he said, do me a favor, I want you to be a shliach, and I want you to send this to Reb Tzvi Segel. Reb Tzvi Segel, I want you to send it to him. I want you to be a shliach, and you let him know that I was chayzer from the psak. And he writes in the Makel Noyam, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, okay, so deliver the goods, right? Where is it? So he says, I have to be honest with you. There were 2 copies. One copy, I sent the Temish of Eruv. I sent it to Reb Tzvi Segel. I don't know where it is. He wasn't alive anymore at the time, by the way, either. And he says, I don't even know what this is. Ich weiß nicht. And my copy got lost. So I don't have it. I can't prove it. I can't demonstrate it. But I'm telling you what exactly happened. And then he went ahead, and this was all included in the Makel Noyam. He lobbied all the Hungarian Rabbanim, and even outside of Hungary. Uberoshim Ramordcha Banet, the Malach Elikim Tzvakis. And Ramordcha Banet, too, came out very strongly on the side of Rabbi Yitzchak Grieshaber. And he said, like the Pak Sheruv, that there's no way in the world that the Noda B'Yehuda was mata this sterlet fish. Now, to be clear, Ramordcha Banet never went so far as to say that the Noda B'Yehuda was chayzer. He didn't say that. He didn't have any evidence of that either. But at the same time, there was no way in the world in his mind that this was something that was okay. Now it's interesting, just hit the pause button for 1 second, that one of the big Manda Amars in this whole pulmis was Ramordcha Banet, as we just mentioned. In fact, just recently, Shailas HaTshuva's Prashas Mordechai on Yeridea was published. Chaim came out a year or two ago. This is already on Yeridea. It was put out by a young man. His name is Reb Leiby Klein. I had the privilege to speak to him this morning. Bechlal about Ramar Chabanet, Befrat about this whole Sterlit controversy. He's a murdiger Bachenta. Balkishrin, the Geschmacki in Gemara, he did an unbelievable work. And in the back of this Yeridea volume, there's a nisfach. It's many, many pages where he goes through this Inyan very, very clear. Incredible footnotes, mamish kedai to go through. But the bottom line is remarkable. It's classic. Every Sfarm Shank should have this anyways. But this is classic. But inside the new Prashas Mordechai, there's 3 simanim that are dedicated to the Shaila. Simanim from Mordechai Siman Dalid, Siman Lamed Aleph, and then Siman Mem Vav. If you go through these simanim, and in the Nisfach, Reb Leiby makes a big deal about this, there seem to be steers in Ramar Chabanet, what his attitude was towards what this tshuva meant. He never said he was chayzer, but there's definitely like a little bit of confusion. Just read a few excerpts. In Siman Dalet, the Ramar Chabanet says, "Ubeli safik shagoyin lo yal ashtirlich neschafen." There's no way in the world that he was matir. This fish over here, he says, there's no way that he was ever mat. Can't be. In Siman Mem Vav, and this is written to Aaron Chorin, so there he has already a whole arichas. And in the middle he says like this: Oy toila b'zeh hadimyin, oy toila atzma be'ilan gadol asher shmoi Noda b'Yehuda b'Yisrael. He said Chorin in his Imrei Noam says that this is kosher based on the Noda b'Yehuda's tshuva. Gadol adinenu meirenu v'rabbeinu zechat tzadik levracha. V'chalila sheyatza kazois melifnei hashala kamoyu. Chalila the Noda b'Yehuda said that this sterlit fish is kosher. Ubeli safik lo hoya lefanav hadag anikla shtir l'chaytik. He had a different type of fish. He said, because I went ahead, and by the way, Ramar Chabanet had done some public scaling of this fish. He did it in Vienna, and his finding was that he couldn't remove it. So he said, there's no way that he meant this fish. Somebody, I believe, must have fooled the Noda b'Yehuda. And when they gave him the fish that they claimed was the Sturgeon fish, it must have been something else. Here, so he was chayzer. In other words, he's tiny that Yehuda wasn't chayzer. He just acknowledged that he had gotten the wrong fish. So if davar, and he calls chorin a chayti umachti as a rabbim. He's mamish yirovim ben avat because he's allowing people to go ahead and eat this fish. So the bottom is Chorin writes this contrast, seemingly innocent. So I don't understand. Like, who are you to go connect with Noda b'Yehuda? He's very disappointed. And he's like, what are you doing? And he says Noda b'Yehuda, and I sent I got the original tshuva, and I sent it to, and Rabbi Yitzchak Grishaber, the Pak Sharuv, he rallies all the Rabbanu B'Rosh Ramar Chabanet, and they all say, again, I don't know what happened over here. There's no way in the world Noda b'Yehuda said this fish. The Ramar Chabanet said that Noda b'Yehuda was never matter this fish. It must have been a different fish, or something must have gone on, right? Again, he didn't know. He was grappling a little bit. As a matter of fact, in Siman Lamed Aleph, this is one of the tshuvas, he says a loshav, Yinei kfar yotzasi chutz mi gidri ketalmud achoylek al rabbi. Mordechai, by the way, was also a Talmud in Noda b'Yehuda. It says, I feel like I don't know, I'm uncomfortable with what I'm doing here. But there's no way he meant this fish. But Rabbi Yitzchak Grishaber, the Pak Sharuv, he took it further. He said Yehuda was matter this fish, but then he went ahead and he was chayzer. So what did they do? What did Dayan do? Right, what do you do? You have a shayla like this. Now Yehuda wrote a tshuva. It sounds like he was matter the Sturgeon. And now, years later, Yehuda's not alive anymore. It's fair, Segel's not alive anymore. There's no one alive today that can be makrish this, right? There's no one alive that could be makrish this. Now all of a sudden, you have Rabbanim that say it never happened. These are real Rabbanim. So what are you supposed to do? So, like, what would you do? You go back to the source, right? So they decided, you know what's going to be machriya? We're going to go back to Prague. And we're going to ask Reb Shmuel Landau, who was literally the band that was Memala Mokum Avoisav. And let's hear what he has to say in terms of how exactly this went down. And Baruch Hashem, Reb Shmuel Landau was good to us because he took his response to this whole question that was asked him, and he incorporated it in Tshuvas Noda b'Yehuda. And if you take a look at Tshuvas Noda b'Yehuda Madura Tinyana, it's the very next simon. So the Tshuva of the Noda b'Yehuda himself is Simon Chav Ches, This is Siman Chav Tes. And just a little warning, this is not for the faint of heart. Says Reb Shmuel Landau. He's writing, L'chvoid HaRav HaMufla Rabbi Yitzchak of Bezdin B'Kila Kedosha Paksh. Mechtovei Hanam Higiyani. I received your letter. Vine Hikshal Lishal Mimeni Davar. He asked something very difficult of me. Lahachnes Atzmi B'Davar Asher B'Machloikis Shnuya. To get involved in a Machloikis. Vani B'Reich Min a Machloikis. I always run away from a Machloikis. Lahachnes Atzmi. Now you expect me to get involved? I'll never do that. He said, besides, I'm reading the pamphlets. This is a fascinating idea. Again, we're talking about Gedolei Yisrael, so we have to be careful. But this is a fascinating idea. Sometimes you have a fight and it looks like it's not even about, right, just about who's right and who's wrong, right? Midas HaNitzuach. Sometimes fights just take on a life of their own. And he says, I'm schmecking a little. It's on the spectrum of Midas HaNitzuach. But being that who's at the heart, who's in the eye of the storm? It's my father. I feel like I need to respond. And then, by the way, here's a copy of my father's original tshuva. Either way, says Reb Shmuel Landau that take a look at the tshuva. You're going to see. That the fish that my father paskin his mother was the fish that the Temesh of a Rav sent him. It was that fish. It's the fish. It's the sterlet. It's the sturgeon fish. Shekol dag shekaskasav niklofim in oray they shriya b'mei efesh shekarin loig oyal yudei pula acheres. I don't care how you remove it. Shapin ikram kaskasav utar. And then he says, "V'tameyani." It's unbelievable to me. I can't fathom. Shekosem malosai. She'adoini avi meiv Rabbi Agoin Zechron Levracha Hodar by Meharazais. You claim that my father was chayzer. V'tziva malasai, and he instructed you l'shleach igeres hadrana to take his retraction and send it la Rav mitemeshvar. Yimchol malasai. You should forgive me. Shadava zehu sheker muchlet. What you're saying is a flat out lie. V'yodua lakoil. Everybody knows. Goydel tzit kosoi shel adoini avi meiv Rabbi Agoin Zechron Levracha. Everyone knows what a tzaddik my father was. V'yamar v'zarz b'mlachas haksiva. And not just that, he wrote all day, every day. V'lama loy kosa. Why would he have not sent the letter back to its original source? He knew him. You know how many years he spent in my father's house? We knew him very well. He was very close to him. Why didn't he send it? This is not like some strange person. He knew him very, very well. You think he was going to rely on you? I want you to know my father was such a tzaddik. He was so medactic when it came to him writing a tshuva. I'm telling you, my father would have not slept. He would not put his head on a pillow. He would have sent it with the proverbial gamla parcha. He sent the tshuva out into the world. Not printed yet, but still it made its rounds. That this fish is mutter, and you have yidden that are sitting at a kiddush club and they eating this sturgeon fish, and you think for 1 second my father would not have thought that he needs to put pashkevillin all over Europe to tell him where it's also? So what are you doing? Where's the letter? Where's the letter? Where's the letter? Oh, you got lost in the mail? Come on. Where's the letter? So I want to tell you another thing. There's a chazaka that, if you walk into a Talmud Chacham's house and you see as an apple, you could eat the apple if he gives you permission. You don't have to be concerned that it might be teva. Why? Because there's a chazaka that a chaver is einu meniach davar she'einu mesukim b'toich beisai. He says, my father, when he passed away, he left over a stack of stuff. He left over a whole pile of tshuvas. And you know what those tshuvas were for? They were meant for Madura Tinyana Noda B'Yehuda. He had printed Madura Kama, and he was getting ready for Madura Tinyana. He says, do you know this tshuva that he sent to Rav Tzvi Hersh Segal is in that stack? Do you know it's sitting over there? How could he have left it there? He's chayzer from it, and he never thought to take it out of his pile of... You can eat an apple, because and my father would leave a tshuva that would have been machshel rivos alpha Yisrael in the isser of eating shkotzim and ramosim. How is even something like that possible? At the very least, lichtoi betzidoi. He should have left a little paper that said he was chayzer. It's posh, you have no nemanis. You don't even have the letter. Come on. He said not just that. I never heard from its fear segel. He never told us kehila that. So Elamai, he never either got it. Kol zehu lemoifis shekvoid malosay sheker ono b'shem adoni avi moiv Rabbi Agoin Zechron Levracha. He says, what he's telling me is not true. This is 100% a lie. Now, in the course of the tshuva, he tells him, "Vanidonis malosay l'kav schus shekavanosay l'shem shamayim." I know it's your kavanos l'shem shamayim. Shelafito usay shebe'einav niragadah. Because you mistakenly think it's us, so you think you need to save the world. But I'm telling you right now, my father was good at learning. My father did the work. He did the experiment. If he was comfortable with the sturgeon, I'm telling you, you have nothing to worry about. This is something that's very okay. There's a lot of Torah in this tshuva as well. It's a few pages long. And one of the things that comes up is that, believe it or not, there's a Pri Chadash that quotes a certain fish called the Sturgeon. And he says, B'Shem de Ramban and B'Shem Rabbeinu Tam, that fish, the only way you were able to remove the kaskasin was if you boiled it in hot water. And he says that if you boil it in hot water, this is quoting the Ramban and Rabbeinu Tam, it's going to be okay. So Shmuel Landau tells him that there's a Pri Chadash. My father didn't bring this Pri Chadash for some reason, but there's a Pri Chadash that says B'Shem de Ramban. So the Ramban himself, HaPesha Os's Lashon is Hu HaPesha Iter. He himself said it's mutter. So this whole Chiddush and my father really is a Mefurish Ramban. Now, it seems that there was a little bit of a tumult there. If the Sturgeon was really the sturgeon, it's not the sturgeon. This is just for a little, just a milsa de bedichasa in middles. He tells him like this. He says, I want to, ukeisani oimer, mashadima malosai shahadag shtirol shehita Rav Me'arad, that this, that Aaron Chorin, at the time he's the Rav Me'arad, things would change. But at the time, he's the Rav Me'arad. What he went ahead and he wrote, Shemat Shadim Malosai is hu anika b'losh in Latin Ishtarian. Loi kein hu. He says, Vanichi pasti b'sifri Chachmei HaTeva. He said, I did a lot of research. I went through some Chachmei HaTeva. I went through some science books. V'roisni b'sefer echad, shechi be'roife Yehudi. There's a Jewish doctor, obviously. Mitoshvei Kila Kedosha Berlin, who lives in Berlin. Ashisham b'tsuyorim kol minei dagim, kotam v'gadol. He has pictures of all the fish, little fish and big fish. Sham hu Mitsuyon b'mareyem, v'tavnisan, b'gvanim shoynim, different colors, kifishem b'chayem. V'sham nirsham kol teva hadagim, talks all the physical qualities of the fish, u'makam moitze'eyem, where you can find them, u'shmoisam, their names, ashenikra alei adomais, am va'am kil shoynim u'chisav. Right, whatever you want, you can find a little shoynim u'chisav. V'sham ra'isi, over there I found, ki agdag is Sturgeon, the Sturgeon fish, nikra b'lash in Latin, Sturia. Ubalash in Italia, Storiano. Ubalash in Sarfas, Estorian. Ubalash in Deutsch, Steiner. Ubalash in Ungarn, Ketchejegi. But the bottom line is, you can't make this up. But here's what he says. In Italy, it's known as the Storiano, and in Hungarian, it's Ketchejegi, right? Kokosh cake. But the bottom line is this. I don't know, it made me laugh. You can't make this up, right? So the kid said, this Ketchejegi is a whole different Indian. It's a different Maisa. This is not what we're going on over here. Anyways, it's a long tshuva, and at the very, very end, the last paragraph, Klalo Yishal Davar, doubles down, does Reb Shmuel Landau. Ani roya shem alosei bolech al midas anitzuach. He said, I see that all you want to do is win. I went through your whole countries, your whole pamphlet. You're all over the place. And as it relates to, you're saying certain things about your Baal Plukta, right? You didn't like Choron. I'm not coming to defend Choron. I don't know him. I'm coming to defend Adoni Avi Moiri Rabbi Agoin Zechron Levracha. Hashem Malosei Hayes Litchos Dvar Bekash. That you wrote a kuntris to go connect him, ulas miaches dvorov kedivrei barbe Rav Dechad Yoima, and you're treating my father like this is his first day on the job, and he made some sort of mistake. Oh, Punk was machshel tens of thousands of Jews. Come on, that's my father. And you write makol noyam to be moich against people that are soymich on his heter. This is not something that you can do. I'm skipping a little bit. This is the sharpest part of the tshuva. He says that you're saying there's a chil Hashem. People are eating this fish chil Hashem. I want you to know. Hine yoyse v'yoyse yesh chil Hashem. Im amoyin am roim sherabu amachleikes. He said, there's not such a chil Hashem if some people are going to eat the sturgeon fish. The chil Hashem is coming from all this fighting. So why should people, the innocent onlooker who doesn't know the sugya, think that the Torah is two Torahs? Said Reb Shmuel Landau. There's no chil Hashem. Even though it was always us. No, so Rebbe Bezdina was Mata Hashem. My father Bezdina was Mata the sturgeon. I don't think that's a kiddush. Chil Hashem. Ukayoytzet varim harbe. Ubefrak bedavish leihukva leisam eolam. It's like you have a tshuva, the Rambam said it's awesome. No one said it's awesome. People didn't eat it. We don't even know why. Ubefrat said Reb Shmuel Landau, Bizman hazeh. We covered our Torah is weakening. This is how scholars raging right now. This is the late 18th century, 1798, 1799. It's that era. If onlookers see two Jews fighting, Bevadai, there's no question in the world. You know what's going to come out from there? This is going to be such a... The Chil Hashem is not that there are Jews being soymech on a Noda b'Yehuda. The Chil Hashem is that Jews are fighting. That's the Chil Hashem. And you have to stop fighting. Don't talk about Chil Hashem. That's where it's going down. Then he tells him, listen, if you want to go ahead and you want to be machmer, be machmer. And if you want to paskin in your kehila, l'chumra, be paskin l'chumra, ulaharish kol onus. But to go ahead and lashmir kolei berabim ulisloinen ala matirin lo yanois gevura. That's not a proclamation of strength. That's not okay. Vashem yivarech esami b'shalom liyos noichem zelazeh b'halacha umeis Hashem yisabracha v'yeshe b'shalva b'simcha b'menucha v'yishma ba'olei kol tzvacha ayhavoi hatorid roivitz tachas masoy akotin Shmuel Segal Landau ben Agoyin Rabbi Yecheskel Zeichet Tzaddik Levrach. Epic tshuva. Madura Tinyana Yeridei Simchav Tes. Lamaisnu Rabbi Yitzchak Grishaber was very disappointed that Rabbi Shmuel Landau was choshed him, that he made up this retraction. He writes another letter to Rabbi Shmuel Landau. Rabbi Shmuel Landau didn't back down. He didn't back down, and he doubled down. It's the next tshuva. It's Simon Lam. It's all printed in Shuvas Like Yehuda. Rabbi Shmuel Landau wanted this to be printed, and he came down very, very strong. He said, "My father held it was mutter, and without a question, this is the way it is." You know, Rabbi Yitzchak Grishaber also wrote a letter to Rabbi Elazar Fleckless, right? Again, together with Rabbi Shmuel Landau. They were running the city of Prague, and they were the two greatest Talmidei Yehuda. And it's printed in Chelik Gimel of Shailos Shuvas Tshuva Me'ahava. It's Tshuva Shin Chav Tes. I'm not going to go through it, but Rabbi Elazar Fleckless essentially came out the same exact way Rabbi Shmuel Landau came out. As a matter of fact, in the last line, nobody wrote more poetically than the Tshuva Me'ahava. Could be literally nobody. He's so poetic, and it seems that one of the things that Rabbi Yitzchak Grishaber, the Pak Sharuf, wrote in his pamphlet was that any person that's going to eat from this sturgeon fish is not going to be zoicha to eat from the Levyasan. Not going to be zoicha to eat from the Levyasan. And he tells the Tshuva Me'ahava, he says, it just bothers me so much that people are being soymech on the Noda b'Yehuda, and they're eating this fish, and the Noda b'Yehuda, and you, and the Prague Bezdin, you're standing by this heter. He says, I want you to be able to be zoicha to eat from the Levyasan. So he writes back, Umasha kosam alosoi, vayeta Yitzchak l'Hashem, right, his name was Yitzchak. Vayeta Yitzchak l'Hashem aleinu ha'rabonim, Bezdin sheyahafach levivenu sheniske v'nichye v'noicha misudas Levyasan. Ki nochoi libay batuach b'Hashem, because he's very confident that kol amater adag hazeh lo yoicha misudasoi. He says, kol ha'sheimeach yitzachak loi. V'Levyasan zeh yotza l'sachik bo, he says. You're making me laugh when I hear this. Ulevai sheyispalul kol hayoim, if you want to be zoichet eat from the Levyasan, v'lo yichapes acher chumris chadoshes. He's trying to find new chumris. Ve'enoi Kain das Rabbi Yitzchak. Listen to his poetry, and this is mamish nish normal. He says, this is not the sheet of Rabbi Yitzchak. B'marava, in Talmud Yerushalmi, Perek Tes, Mesechta Zadorim, Sha'amar, lo yidayich ma she'osra Torah, ela she'ata oiser aleinu dvarim amutarim. He quoted the Rabbi Yitzchak in Yerushalmi, Zadorim, Perek Tes. The bottom line is, in Prague, this did not go over well, this whole Indian. It didn't go over well. And they stood very firmly by their heter. In fact, in Prague, they ate the sturgeon. It was something that they ate. They held it was mutter, they held it in was matter. And this was the minig as it was there. Lamaisa, this tumult took on a life of its own. And Lamaisa, Nimnu V'Gamru, being that it was, being led, again, the one in the trenches the most was the Pak Sharuf. But the support that he had by the Gedolei Yisrael, there's a Yesh Oimrim, there's a lot of tumult in this poemus, whether a Meshulam Igra, who was the Preshberger Rav, and, definitely one of the Gedolei Oimrim, if not the Gadol Adar, where he stood, it seems like he was also from the Machmirim and from the Oisrim, and for sure a Mart Chabanet. And the bottom line is, at the end of the day, the Oisrim won, and the Machmirim won. And it's for that reason, Ada Yoim Mazeh, until today, the sturgeon fish is considered a non-kosher fish. And there is no orthodox, halachic, kashrus agency in the world that will give a heter and will give a hashkach on the sturgeon fish. It's not going to happen. So at the end of the day, the Machmirim won. And it's really, when you think about it, it's just so fascinating. It's so fascinating. Whenever you go through one of these polemics, again, we did an abridged version of it, but whenever you go through one of these polemics, it's always like, what's the punchline, right? What's the takeaway? I don't know. I'm really not sure. I'm a little torn. To me, for sure, the more interesting part of the polemic is the aftermath. It's not is the fish kosher or not. It's that it was chayzer, and did they send him the wrong fish? And it's even possible, right? And even Rabbeinu Tam, but b'midah da'achila, this is for sure the way it is. So is there makom to say that there were literally kehilos kedoshas of Jews that were eating non-kosher fish based on a psak of the biggest poison in the last it's exactly 250 years since Madura Kama was published, right? The biggest poison in the last 250 years. Could you say that? I don't know. Could you say that? It doesn't sound like you could even say that. It's impossible. How could the legacy of the Noda B'Yehuda have this reyes on it? It's almost not possible. But you go through it, and there's a lot of things that cause you. Again, this is just me. Leaving. What went on here? First of all, what was the mitzias? Rabbi Yehuda said he peeled it off. He said he was able to do it with a keli, and once he soaked it, then then for sure he was like. Ramat Chabanet said he did a public experiment. He did it in Wien. There were many rabbanim there. We couldn't get it off. It was impossible to get it. So what was the mitzias? What is the mitzias today? I don't even know. But what was the mitzias? Could you peel it off, or could you not peel it off? The other question is, where was the Pakshirov coming from? What was Rabbi Yitzchak Grishaber's? What was? Rabbi Yehuda was really chayz. Doesn't sound like it, right? So what? He was saying this for a reason. The Teretz says he thought it was aser. And by the way, there's no question in the world of Shem Shemayim Nischavim. He's a tzaddik yisoid olam. I was even hesitant to say this but he was a tzaddik yisoid olam, and he was doing this 100%. You look at what was Chorin's agenda. Now hindsight's 2020. So if you look back in time, Chorin is some very left-leaning rabbi who eventually, was Yatzel L'Tar B'Sra, in the words of the Chassam Sofer. So if that's the case, this looks like an early sign. But then again, you read the Imrei Noyam, you don't see it, and he's defending the Noda B'Yehuda. And the Prague Bezdin agreed to him. They said he's right. So is this a sign of, Chorin at an early age already showing Episa Simon over here? Or no, Chorin actually got this one right. And we understand history treats the Pak Sharuv a lot better than it treats Chorin. But in real time, in the late 1790s, he's a Rav of an Hungarian city like the Pak Sharuv is, and technically he's on the right side of things. It's not clear. Was this related to Chodesh Asam and Atayra? I don't know. Could be this is what was going on. Haskell is raging. Shmuel Landau tells him, he said, why be mar machloikis? The Haskell is raging. People want to say, see shnei ivrim nitzim b'machne. Maybe that's where he's coming from. You're going to take a fish that everyone always held was awesome. Now you're going to eat it? Who knows what's going to come next? Now the Chassam Sofer's battle cry, Chodesh Asam and Atayra, wouldn't start until later. But again, this is definitely early stages Haskalah. There's no question in the world. And this is the Hungarian shita of we're going to protect this with literally with a shield of kaskasim to make sure that nothing's going to get through. So again, this leaves you hanging. It feels like the Yehuda held it was muftar. It's almost, again, that's what came from Prague. But then Ramat Chabanet said, not. So we're going to be machriya? I don't know. This is a very, very hard one to be machriya. It's not so clear what the legacy of this tumul is. I mean, this idea that Adam Gadol writes a tshuva and he comes out a certain way and the people get uncomfortable, and then, all the stories start coming. He was chayzer, he wasn't chayzer, he meant this, he meant that. This is a clinic in terms of how you go about that. I mean, I don't even think it's a question in the world. This is a clinic. Read Reb Shmuel Landau and Yeridei Madura Tinyana Sim Chav Tes. Sheker Much gives him 6 reasons why this is for sure not what happened. One thing I will tell you, I don't know if you know, but the sturgeon fish, right? You know anything about the sturgeon fish? It's a very expensive fish. In fact, the caviar that comes from sturgeon is the most expensive caviar in the real caviar. And this is something that's eaten only by the mamish. You could pay thousands for a beluga sturgeon caviar. It could be like $1,000 an ounce. This is like very, very high-end stuff. So the fact that Nimnu V'Gomer, the sturgeon, is not kosher, definitely saved Klal Yisrael a lot of money. I don't think that's the legacy, but for sure, because if not, this would be on every fish board that you've ever been to at any Tayameh. They would say, "Can you pass the sturgeon, please? I'll take the beluga sturgeon with the beluga vodka." That would make for a great 1-2 punch. The bottom line is, no one's going to eat it today. It's considered, already a few hundred years of not okay. Meisim Prague, they ate it. A fascinating topic, and I think an appropriate way to end Perek Elu Trefus. So again, Hadran Allah Elu Trefus.